Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with Judy Karofsky, and I'm going to add her to the screen here in just a second. Where are you, Judy? There you are. Oh, man. I'm sorry we got a late start because we had a lot of technical issues, but you look great. I think I can hear you. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you
Okay, fine.
fine.
And I hear you fine,
Oh,
finally.
good.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this. And you have written, let me, I'm getting my act together here. That's me, one-to-one with John DeDakis. And that is my website. And we're doing the housekeeping stuff. This is a very low budget show, Judy. And we're one-to-one with Judy Karofsky. Judy has written I would call it a public policy memoir about the ordeal that she and her mom went through navigating the assisted living and hospice industry. Her mom was in like 6 different facilities. And in one, it was a hospice facility. They kicked her out because you didn't die fast enough. So Judy has written a book called, let me see if I can that's going to take me a minute to do that. So Judy, welcome to One-to-One, and talk about DisElderly Conduct, which is the name of your book. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look for it and pull it up on the screen.
Okay, so yes, the name of the book is DisElderly Conduct. It's a phrase we've coined to so that it's in the public mind that strange things are going on that we really don't like in the assisted living and hospice industries. One tiny correction. John, my mom did not die. My mom was not kicked out of a hospice facility. She never was
Okay.
in one. That's part of
Oh,
that,
okay.
and that's part of our story.
All
She
right.
actually was never admitted to one. So we moved her 6 times to 6 different facilities. Towards the end of her life and her journey, I hoped beyond hope that she would be admitted to a hospice facility. And this is an issue that people haven't discussed with me yet, because of the fact that she was on mind-altering meds, anti-anxiety meds. I think that was the reason that they did not want to accept her. And there was the irony, she was on meds to keep her anxiety, her aggressions down, but it was a catch-22 that kept her from acceptance in a lot of facilities. So there's a short version of the story.
Okay, well, I'm glad you corrected the record.
That's
And
okay.
and I should say, I mean, you and I go back a long way. It's almost as if my career has come full circle because I interviewed you when I was a student at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and we in our class, the class project was we did a profile on someone, and we chose you because you were the newly elected mayor of Middleton, Wisconsin. One of the first female mayors in the country, if I'm not mistaken, or at least in
In the
Wisconsin.
state, for sure.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, I mean, you were a mom, you were a you had a high-powered job. And so we profiled you. And that was when we first met like 50 years ago.
You didn't just profile us, you filmed us. You arrived at our house before we were even out of bed and
No,
set up. And this was not video, this was filming.
film. Yeah.
And you were at our breakfast table filming the family. You filmed my former husband at his work. You filmed us at activities, playing tennis, and you filmed me at City Hall. Yes, for a week, I presume. But you and I have retained a friendship after that, and that I lose track of how we did that over the years. But I was always aware of what you were doing. And then, can I short circuit to say that when I started to write this book, I was aware that you were doing writing seminars, writing workshops, and some coaching. And I asked you if you would be my coach. And the key word, the glue, was that you were doing some discussions, and I participated in one online discussion on grief.
Right.
And
Right.
I sat in on that. And that's what allowed me to move ahead with the book, because I was stuck. I was having problems. I didn't realize that's where the problems were, but it was very difficult for me to describe certain scenes.
Oh, well, my goodness.
Okay.
I don't think I made the connection then between the grief class and the writing of this book,
Mhm.
because I mean, I help people, I teach classes in how to write a memoir, how to write a novel. But that is certainly a success story, because one of the focuses of the grief class is to use writing as a way to heal from grief, and find a way to, move forward purposefully. And you've obviously done that with this, not with this book.
I hope that I have. And because I've been thinking about that class over the last 48 hours since I knew that we would be speaking. And what I wanted to remember was how many different kinds of grief were assembled in that workshop, a weekend workshop, correct?
Right.
It wasn't just loss of parent, loss of family member, which you can discuss. It was loss of all kinds of things. And I think what I learned was that what I had learned, had learned was not just that I had lost a parent, who was, by the way, 99 and almost 100, 9 days away from being 100. So there's that anticipated loss, which I had to come to terms with. But I lost the goodbye that I thought I would have with my
Mm.
mother after, of course, that lifetime and my lifetime, and the attention that she had received and that I had tried to help her receive in those 6 assisted living facilities and with hospice aboard. And it just didn't happen that way. There she,
There
there's,
she is. There
yeah.
she is.
And
Tell us about your mom.
so at that point, my mom is in an assisted living facility in the area. That's my dog sitting on her lap. That's how she was in assisted living. She had at that point had a stroke, and she had broken her hip, so she was
Mm.
in a wheelchair all the time. And there's a gait belt, a pink gait belt around her waist. She was quite stylish. You can see if she
Uh-huh.
was wearing pink pants, she was dressed in the pink gate belt and a pink bow in her hair. She always had a bow in her hair. She had grown up as a foster child. She was the oldest of 3 when her mother died of a self-induced abortion. That's the family history.
Mm.
And after um, pulling herself up by the literally by the bootstraps and telling her dad that she wanted to keep house while she was in high school for the 3 children and for him, and being able to do that, years passed. She joined a major US corporation, that being AT&T, and T, and went
Mhm.
on to have quite a career, a very successful career doing advertising for Yellow Pages for AT&T. So that's my
Well,
mom.
and it was a pretty audacious way that she got the job.
She just walked into what was then a tall building. Now they call them, now they're skyscrapers in downtown Boston, and said to the person at the desk, I want to have an interview today. Someone needs to hire me. And she did. And she just moved herself right up the ranks. She was very clever, very wordy. When she retired from that advertising career, she started to, she always would tell jokes at the family dinner table or the Thanksgiving table. People would say, tell us a joke, Lillian. And she would. But then she started a stand up comedy routine, which she carried through to her independent living days in the city in Madison, in the city in which I live.
Did
So
she put together a stand-up routine?
she had one. Yes, she did. And she did it for talent shows and in a bar, a piano bar in Madison. She would go on Thursday nights. Sometimes we would just go to hear the music because she loved the music. But very often they would stop at intermission because there was an intermission.
Mhm.
And Lillian would grab the mic, and the first thing you would hear was, settle down, everyone. So this little voice would tell, and they did. This noisy bar would settle down, and my mom would tell jokes. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then we've got a couple of other pictures of her here. There's the
Thank
dog
dog again.
again. Now, and is she in what's the context of this picture?
She's in a assisted living facility. This is actually an earlier picture than the one you just showed.
Mhm.
She's in a more um, capacious, is that a word? A wheelchair.
Mhm.
An interesting fact, after she broke her hip, the assisted living director of this facility said, let's get her the Cadillac of wheelchairs, which, by the way, was funded by Medicare, by hospice. Everything that hospice provided for my mom, for anybody, is funded through Medicare. That's an interesting fact. So let's get on that track for a little bit. Hospice is not a charity. I didn't pay for her supplies, but my mother was, uh, the assisted living director thought that that would be the best kind of wheelchair for my mom. It had webbing, it had the cushioning that you just saw, and it allowed her to be in that wheelchair all day long. She could take a nap in it. They just tilted it back. Then she sat up in it. It was cumbersome. If I took her out for a walk, I had to switch her to a lighter wheelchair because it almost had a mind of its own. It was so heavy. I say all that because when she did move from that facility to the next facility, which was her third, they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let her sit and have that wheelchair. They
Why
said
not?
it, they said it was a body restraint, and that she couldn't have. So there's just two different opinions.
Right.
So we went through all of that because nothing about assisted living is is there's no rules about assisted living. It's all nothing standardized. Let me get to this point that there are no federal regulations, no federal oversight about assisted living. None. The only rules and regs are state, and they're not very stringent. And an assisted living facility could say, we would like, or we want Lillian to be in this wheelchair because which they did, so that she could be moved around in it all day long. She didn't have to go back to nap at her bed. She could just be tilted back in that blue wheelchair that you saw, which, by the way, was made in Canada. So maybe there won't be so many of them coming to this country.
The tariffs.
Tariffs. But I can even remember the name of it. But as she said, we're going to get her the Cadillac of wheelchairs. And then in the next facility, she wasn't allowed to be in one because it was inhumanely restraining her. So she was
Well,
in a small, and
there's so many different places we can go with this
all of
interview.
it.
Um, and of course, your book really, I mean, you kept a journal during this time. So, who knew? I mean, you certainly didn't know at the time how arduous this journey would be. How long was it from the time that she entered the first assisted living facility to when she actually died?
4.5 years. So 6 facilities in 4.5 years.
And is there one particular thing that stands out as epitomizing the problem that exists with assisted living and hospice?
I think I say it in several different ways. There are no rules. Each facility has its own set of standards, has its own rules, even to the point of no way to assure that activities that are advertised will take place, or that the type food that is promised, advertised, will be served.
And
Or that
there's no recourse either. If they renege on their promises, you're just stuck with it.
who are you going to tell? I did write letters about serious things. Understaffing is major,
Mhm.
and the way it's solved is through many times is through temporary agency staffing. So there are bodies willing to serve, good people who would otherwise be attentive and caring, but they didn't have the training or the background or the experience in that facility, and probably didn't have the training, background, and experience in any, but they were hired to be present, to be passing out medicines, to be putting people to bed. Always a change of face. That was a major problem. Staffing, people just left in the middle of their um,
Your
Of course,
your
their
shift.
hours, the
Yeah, in the
shift.
middle of the shift,
Yeah,
they'd
right.
leave.
They would just walk out. That did happen. It wasn't a frequent occurrence, but it did happen. And then send a note back. Oh, I'm sorry I left. I miss you. Come visit. I write about this in the book. I did visit somebody because her next job was at the drive-in at Taco Bell, which is fine. I mean, this is how she was supporting herself and her family. But the switch was uh, quite sad to observe. And then my mom loved the caregivers who were consistent and did love her. I have some pictures of her being chosen the Valentine person for Valentine's Day.
Mhm.
And she always thought she was going to go to the weddings when they took place. And she loved to tease them about their boyfriends or their girlfriends or their partners or their upcoming weddings. She was always planning a dinner with them. But they were overworked, and the downside of the other side of it was the nights that I would walk through an empty facility looking for someone to either give my mom the scheduled meds or to help me put her to bed, because as time went on she did become shorter and lighter weight, but more of a burden to transfer from a wheelchair to a bed. And they really didn't want me to be the person to put her to bed. But many nights I had to do that because it just took so long for somebody to appear to help.
What effect did this all have on your mom? I mean, obviously it was a problem for you. How did she react to all of this?
My mother knew she wasn't being taken care of. She told me that even a couple of weeks before she died, she knew that she was not. My mom, fortunately for me, was not dying from Alzheimer's, and that seems to be one of the major reasons that people uh, die at that age, become less involved with their own care. She knew what was going on. Um, and she, because she started to lose her capacity to move, and they were moving her in and out of bed and on and off the toilet, she would kick them, she would push them away. And when she pushed, she could push. I mean, she pushed me away one day and I was winded for the rest of the day.
Uh-huh.
I can smile about it now, but I understand how frustrating her life must have been. And then she did lose her ability to articulate. It became difficult to understand what she was saying. Of course, I was with her for so long, and I was her daughter, and I understood her Boston accent. So I always knew what she was saying, and I could be her interpreter if I was present. So and then if she couldn't be understood, and somebody came close to her, she could bite.
Oh
She could
my.
bite. And they
Sure.
and that was one of the reasons that she was put on um, meds to quiet her down. And the very meds, as I said, that kept her out of facilities because they didn't want to have to deal with those problems. The problems were general. Um,
Look, you've got a background in politics and public policy. You've got several degrees. You've worked in the healthcare, or at least the senior health industry, or at least from a public policy perspective. You know a lot about this. What were some of the misconceptions that you had? What were some of the surprises that you encountered when you were trying to care for your own mom?
I think the biggest one in the progression of assisted living facilities is that an assisted living facility is not a medical facility. It's not intended to be. The state of Wisconsin, and I'm not sure how it is in other states, but I assume it's similar, limits the hours of nursing or medical care that a resident can have in a week. 3 hours, only 3 hours. And some of the facilities have no nurse on board at all. When the
Why is it restricted?
Because they're not health facilities. They are residences for people who need some help with some activities of daily living, ambulation, toileting, eating, dressing, going to bed, but they don't need the full-time skilled nursing that residents of nursing homes unfortunately do need at that stage.
Mhm.
And the concept of assisted living was developed in Oregon in the 1980s, so it's not that old. And the concept was intended to provide a residence or residences for people who required that kind of help with certain activities of ADRs, activities of daily living,
Mhm.
but didn't require the full-time nursing. And they could have rooms or apartments with doors that shut, lock their own doors, paint their rooms, bring their own furniture. My mom always had her own furniture in these places, to my to my detriment, because we kept moving it. They could have pets in some places. One of the things I read was that they could have M&Ms in their apartments. They were a step beyond independent living, which is also a senior housing category, but they were not intended to be a health facility. And
But
and that was
was
a,
that a misconception?
absolutely. One of the reasons that we left her first one was that the nurse who was there did have an office. My mom could visit because she liked that. She liked going to the nurse, Band-Aids, whatever she needed, eye drops, which she did get from that nurse. Um, but then she was no longer going to be there. And several things had happened in that facility that made my mom uneasy, unhappy, um, realizing she was not being well cared for. But that was one of the final straws, that they fired her for reasons that I was never certain about. That
Mhm.
nurse came to visit her, was a friend, came to visit her at her next facility, but um, that's one nurse story. Another, in her third or fourth facility, was that there was no nurse on board at all, no one in the house, but a traveling nurse visited, the made the rounds of probably 7 or 8 assisted living facilities in the area that were owned by the same organization. So
Mhm.
she would show up once every 2 weeks.
Whoa.
Big whoa.
So if you had it to do over again, what advice do you
Oh,
have for people who are trying to make a decision, often under duress? Uh,
always.
how does one discern whether this is going to be a good experience?
Don't you really, really don't know. And I often I hear what I know what I did, and I hear people making the same type decision. Number one, you just said it. It's crisis driven. It's not something you plan for. Something happens, a health situation changes, and people have to decide upon the next housing model. Proximity helps a lot of families. They want to be near their loved ones who are in assisted living. um, Frequently people make decisions based on other people whom they know who are in that facility, thinking, well, they made a good decision, so I'll pursue it. Neither of those is a valid way to make a decision. You just don't know, John. Honestly, you don't know what's going to happen. In my mother's third facility, all of the staff, made of the senior staff, directors, nurses, there were some nurses there, um, deputy director, they all left after she was there for 4 months. It was just a complete turnover. Not because the corporation changed, but just because, I don't know, they one after the other left. There's no stability. Of course, that could happen in any place at any
Yeah,
time.
there's no way you can
No,
know
no.
that.
But it did happen there, and it happened at a wholesale level. So many people left. And then whole departments were decimated because of the changes, and there was no way to know. I
What
think the
can
most important thing
Mhm.
is to be aware that you're not there. You can change as long as the resident is strong enough, because it is debilitating to move, reacclimate an old person as well as the loving, caring relative. It's really difficult to acclimate to a new facility. It was never our intention to do that.
What are some of the things that need to be done in order to address the problems that happened?
Um, I vaguely say state rules, federal rules, the US Senate Committee on Aging met in January of 24, so already almost a year and a half ago. But so much has happened since then. And there on that committee was the Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and the Massachusetts Senator Liz Warren. And Liz Warren made some statements that were reported in the Washington Post after that meeting, saying we just have to make changes in this industry. We have to start regulating this industry. But that's the last comment that I've ever seen or heard about it. And one of the biggest problems is the source of funding. And I happen to have done a study on investing in senior housing many years ago, 2008, 2009, during the housing crisis, actually, because there's this side of it. We do need investment in senior housing. People have to see understand it might be a risky investment for various reasons, but the funding has to be there so that we have housing for the seniors who are coming down the line, increasing every year, every decade. But what has happened is because of that need for funding and the profitable business model, where they don't even have to find customers, they just appear. They don't even have to do a market study because of the demographics. The old people just keep coming. The older people just keep coming. The healthier older people just keep coming. We are very aware now of the infusion of private equity, REITs, real estate investment trusts, pension funds, which is a sort of a mixed benefit because it benefits those who have pensions with the pension funds. But the problem of the remote funding is exacerbated by remote management, remote decision making.
Mhm.
When my mom was in one facility and kept falling on the floor because nobody appeared when she needed to leave her bed at night, she would get out of bed by herself, and I'd receive a phone call. I'm in, as you know, central Wisconsin. The person I was on the phone with was in Edina, Minnesota, northern
Mhm.
Minnesota. I knew her by name after a while because I received a call so many nights. Well, what is a person in Minnesota going to do for my mom who's fallen on the floor in a suburban Wisconsin facility? That's the big one of the biggest issues right now, if not the biggest. One
I
of them.
want to I want to go to the funding thing because you
Yes.
probably remember Lee Dreyfus when he was governor of Wisconsin, Republican governor, former university professor, and he used to talk about the golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules. And so, uh, and when the government is involved, boy, if you lose your government funding, you're screwed. And of course, that's going on big time now. There's the big beautiful bill that's in Congress that it's supposed, there are going to be
Right
big
now. Hmm.
Medicaid cuts that are going to
Hmm.
fund, tax breaks for, billionaires.
Hmm.
So you've got to be, I'm thinking, fairly despairing of the
Despairing.
future.
Yes.
Is that a good
And
word? Is that a good word?
it's a very good word. This book was written over a number of years, as you know, Coach. It was read. It was accepted by a publisher last summer at the beginning of July, end of June, beginning of July. Then it was on my computer for a long time. We were editing it, we were revising it, moving sections around, and then came the election, and then came all that we know. And I thought, along with people who were helping me with this book, that it was just probably the worst time to be looking for um, attention, controls over the industry until we realize, no, this is when we have to fight for it. And that's interesting what you said to me about Lee Dreyfus. Yes, I remember that. Yes, I remember the phrase. But at that time, I was a student of Jim Grasscamp. And as I was reminded in the last couple of days, his mantra was people over profits. People over profits. I'm going to move forward with that one. I said the night of the book launch, which was only a week ago, that we had moved from discussion, which is very helpful, by the way. People like to talk about what they're going through. It just happened to me as I was buying a sandwich on the square, the Madison Capitol Square for lunch. Oh, Judy, I've been wanting to talk to you. Just talk. Discussion really helps. Sharing. From that to a public policy discussion, as you said, we have written a public policy memoir, to now a call for action. Very serious about having this be part, a major part of all of the reaction to all of that's going on in the government. And yes, to the big beautiful bill.
Um, Look, you were an elected official. You were the mayor of Middleton, Wisconsin. But as far as I know, that was the only time you were involved in elective that you ran for office. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. I never did that again. My
Why was
kids,
it that bad of an experience?
no, it was a wonderful experience. I love being mayor. Losing wasn't fun, but I thought that my kids were entering middle school, and there was probably not the I didn't want them to be the kids of the mayor as they were going through middle school and high school, and so
So
I
it
did
was
not.
it was a strategic decision.
I probably would have. I would have loved to have one more term. I always, but then that was my goal. I never did run again. I considered it several times. People asked me to run for various positions. I was never sorry that I didn't. But as you know, I moved on to be the staff of a governor, and that was pretty political. And I've always taken part in campaigns. I was the chair of two presidential campaigns, actually, in this state. So always been involved in politics, haven't you? Know that. Always
I
have been.
do.
We all
Yeah,
have. We all
right.
have.
And so there's a certain satisfaction that you can get from, pulling the levers behind the scenes as well, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the writing process. Um, you've written a lot, you've written, op-eds and columns and scholarly works and things like that. This is the first book.
Oh yeah.
Um,
And my
do you,
last.
do you, well, that was my question. Did this cure you of the disease or,
I never had the disease. I never wanted or planned to write a book. I kid with some of my friends that the only article I was ever planning to write was about Madison's purple houses. I used to keep track of them, and I wanted to do
there's a
that.
bestseller right there.
Right
I'll
there.
tell you.
They've disappeared, though. I don't think there's a purple house left in Madison. Um, the book, you've heard me say this, wrote itself. Things happened that were book worthy, that were story worthy, that helped with the chronology of my mother's trek. Um, of course, I would write something else because I think you also know how satisfying I felt it was. And you didn't help me when I didn't want to go any farther.
What do you
Because
mean?
what I heard you say was keep writing. That's how I interpreted it. And I did.
Well, and I mean, and it's got to be fun. And I know there were times when it was frustrating, and I think I heard you say at some point that what was really frightening was trying to pitch an agent.
Oh yeah, because you told me what to do. You told me about the
I
book
made
that was.
suggestions. I made suggestions.
You told me what to do. Because you told me twice, in case I wasn't paying attention to you. There was there was a book at the library that was waiting for me, and it had all the agents, and it was an annual publication. And I tell other people this too, of course. And it's broken up into segments: young adult literature, pornographic literature, nonfiction, fiction. I think there's a pornographic section, but but what
I
I
wouldn't
did.
know. I wouldn't
Yeah,
know.
right. Neither I. But what I did was start with the Z's and turn and go backwards through the book, figuring that anybody else who was starting with this very thick list of agents
Mhm.
went from the A's. So I did that for a while, and then one day you told me that there were unagented publishers, and
Right.
that there was a list of them, and a lot of people, publishers on that list were university presses. So I wrote to a lot of university presses, many of whom had interest in the book, good interest, and but said, This is not what we're doing right now, but you should call whoever, Rutgers or and they all had somebody else in mind. And I started to make some progress with one, and then it was serendipitous, quite honestly, that I sent a proposal to New Village Press last summer. I prepared it over a few days in June, and I held it until my birthday, and I mailed it so it would have my birthday as the date on the email. And the rest, as they say, is literary history. They asked for a manuscript, and we moved on from there.
Let's take a look at it again. What's it like when the book, shows up for the first time in a box that is
It's
delivered to your house?
Yeah, it's crazy, and holding it, it just seemed to have so much heft. And I have it, of course, open at various pages. And I remember not only those words, but how I felt when I wrote those words, because this was for
Uh,
me quite an emotional process, which
yeah.
I'm sure your book writing is too. And I do remember the time when I was stuck, and John DeDakis suggested that I just write a novel, that do it as fiction.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I tried I tried that for about 48 hours, but it kept coming out as the same
Yeah,
story.
it's not for everybody. I mean, that's the thing about writing. There's so many different avenues. There are different ways to tell a story. And this is the default. This is where you kept coming back to. And and was there a lot of work that was done once you landed a publisher? They don't just go, okay, bam, we're going to print it. It's still a very involved process behind the scenes, right?
Yes, my best friend for several weeks was the copy editor who let me know a lot of things about my footnotes and my punctuation, and a lot of things about the footnotes, actually. I was quoting things that I did not have to quote, and then I spoke to some uh, private property, intellectual property people who
Mhm.
suggested that I could paraphrase a lot of things and didn't have to have a bazillion footnotes. So that changed the format of the book. And then uh, um, one person on the publisher's staff had to look at it and actually switched events. This follows that more logically, Judy, and I loved getting that kind of advice.
Mhm. Mhm.
First of all, it said somebody's reading my work, and the last stages were correcting errors, being consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times can you say long-term care with two hyphens or one hyphen? We had discussions about that all the time.
We're talking in the weeds
Oh,
now.
and it stayed in the weeds, and it went back to me, and then back to the publisher, and back to me. And then I have a very good friend who I know that and I can shout out to Eve Galanter, who
Yeah,
did the final proofreading. And this is what she found among many things. But on the very last page, which is about the author, that would be me,
right.
in my bio.
You misspelled your name.
No, not quite. It could have, but didn't. But the very last word of the very last sentence of the last page of the book, there was no period after. I think it says, and she lives in Madison, right? So let that be a warning I think I know about one word, one small word that's not in the text, and I will buy dinner for somebody else who finds it, because it's going to remain a secret until somebody else finds it. But it did take that length of time.
Do
Yeah.
you think you're gonna
And
write another book of any kind?
you keep asking me that,
I'm
and
just
I guess
asking,
I
I'm just
will.
asking. You don't have to.
But I think that I basically enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
And now that I understand it more, yes, I would hope to. I would certainly like to write a sequel to this one on improvements and new
Well,
ideas.
it may need to be updated. It may need to be
I would
updated,
hope.
right?
I would
Yeah.
hope. And there are improvements and there are updates, by the way. There are assisted living facilities who had to update, had to change their model because of the pandemic, which came 2 years after my mom died.
Mhm.
And John, on the day before, last Monday, the day before the launch of the book, a review appeared in the Progressive magazine online. And the response to that came the very next morning, or a response to it came the very next morning from the Association of People Who Are in Palliative Care and Hospice. And I can only paraphrase now because I don't have it. But basically, what the editor of that newsletter said was, we like getting praise, we like hearing good things, but there are times when we have to listen to the criticisms. And she basically said in 2 or 3 sentences, let's try harder.
Wow.
Big wow.
Very
So
well. Well, and one
yeah,
of the things that I think that's good about this, and you and I talked about it in the very early stages, is that you're not, this isn't an indictment. It's not like, you're going, I mean, you don't name the facilities that your mom was at, because this isn't the point. You're not trying to take down someone, you're trying to improve things. But you're also, giving an account of things that actually happened. And so, it's as frustrating and as concerning it is as the story is. I think what you're striving for and going for is reform, and that, I think, always leaves a person with hope that things can change if we get a sense of what needs to change. Am I right?
absolutely. That we have a call to action to try and make some changes. And John, whenever I meet people or hear stories, and I do a lot, I mean, people email me now, but stop me as I was buying lunch today, as I
Yeah.
said.
Well, you're out and
Um,
about. You're out and
but
about all the time in Madison. You're
I
a
try to be,
trickster.
because you've visited me.
Yeah.
Um, that there are people, and it's a blessing, and I feel the blessing, and I'm grateful to hear these stories for whom the entire experience worked the way we all hope it will. One person talked to me about the promise of hospice, and that promise is frequently fulfilled. And some people have a comfortable experience in an assisted living facility and don't move even once.
Right.
And I'm very happy to hear that. But we have to keep our ears open and be aware of what can happen and what can go wrong, and when those promises are not fulfilled. That's painful.
I want people to be able to get in touch with you, but because we got a late start, I don't have the kind of contact information that I feel comfortable, putting out into the world. Is there an email address or something, a way, and I'll put it on the screen, but I'll type it now if you dictate it to me, on how people can get in touch with you?
Only my private one. So let's start with the first. There is a website for DisElderly Conduct,
Let's
and
do
that's
that.
and that's exactly what it is. www dot
Uh-huh.
diselderly conduct. And people might have to be very careful with the spelling, because those little AI monsters want to change the spelling to something like disorderly. So you have to be
Yeah.
very careful that
Yeah.
you type, but once you've done it, your computer will remember it, and they'll know.
.com.
Um, diselderlyconduct.com.
Okay, I'm going to file that and put it up on the screen,
Thank you.
and you can be my copy editor here. DisElderlyConduct.com.
Let's
And
see.
so
We
and
did
there would,
good.
this is payback time right now. So this is how people would be able to get in touch with you through your publisher, right?
Correct. And the publisher is New Village Press
Okay, let's create,
in in New York.
all right, let's say that again.
New Village, which is of course one word, New Village Press, www dot New Village Press. Oh,
Okay.
they are .org, excuse me.
Okay, newvillagepress.org. Okay, we'll throw that up on the screen. Newvillagepress.org. And I spelled village correctly, I believe.
Looks good to
Obviously,
me.
it's not case sensitive when you don't have to capitalize things, but I'm doing that just so people can see it more clearly. And they can get in touch with you through DisElderlyConduct.com, which is the name of the book. So is there something else you're working on, or this is, I mean, it's become a full-time job to promote the book. And what are you discovering about, the marketing side of things? Because, that's not necessarily your specialty. Are you finding, though, that you're having to do it and you're enjoying it and learning from it?
Totally, because until now, it's not been what people thought it would be, a book tour. I presume I will make appearances. I have a couple of requests through the Midwest later in the summer and the fall. Podcasts,
Yeah,
podcasts. And I did, and there was one um, excerpt that appeared this week, and there was another opinion piece that appeared last week. So I've had some press, and all of that is on my Facebook page, where people can all could they, if they want to reach me personally, that's a public Facebook page. So
uh-huh.
that might make some sense. Um, and so
Yeah,
I'm writing about the book and the issues, and always framing it in terms of what I've learned since even the publication, which was just a week ago.
yeah, yeah.
People are helping me round out the story.
What didn't I ask you that you feel we need to touch upon?
I thought it was a lot of fun when you called me one night and said, "Do you want a beer?" And you showed up in Madison.
Yeah,
because because we had the chance to look at this beautiful city from a very high
I
place.
love Madison, Mad City. I was a reporter there for 8 years, and I think you live very near the Capitol Square, if I'm
I
not
do.
mistaken.
I can see the Capitol from my house actually. So what I think what I would want to happen now is for this book to be present in bookstores. So for people to request it, can be purchased online. That's been possible since for several months. I mean, I think I ordered mine last October, but that would be very helpful if the book and questions about it just happen to occur in independent bookstores around the country. There is a Kindle version, which I discovered within the last 2 days, and that's kind of
Good.
fun to play with.
Yeah,
But I just want the book to be um,
there it
held
is.
and embraced and shared, because this was our experience, but it is the experience that's so universal, uh, and we all need to be able to um, hold each other up during the period. There she is during that period.
There she is.
Yeah,
We should probably just take one more look at your mom, Lillian. She was what, 99 and a half when she died.
9 days less than
Oh my
100.
goodness. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
she was
And
striving.
were you with her at the end?
I was with her at the end, and that's what was so difficult to
Hmm.
write. But I don't claim to be the only person who would ever have difficulty writing about a loved
Yeah.
one's leaving.
Yeah.
Um, I was there, but the story of those last hours are revealed in the book. And I read those two chapters again last night in preparation for talking to you, because that was a very important segment of what we said today. I was a new author, but I think any author would have trouble writing word for word, moment for moment, second by second, something that was so painful to be part of, to observe, but actually to be part of. So that grief discussion, writing through grief, however John DeDakis described it, um, was really what made this book possible. So thank you.
You are welcome, but thank you for writing it. And thank you for taking the time to tell us about it. We've been one-to-one with Judy Karofsky, and I'm John DeDakis. That's my name, and that's my website. And Judy, this has been a treat. Thank you.
Thank you, John.